He quit TV news too. Excited to be here with Dave Bondy. I don't we're not TV news rejects, are we, Dave? We chose to quit. We're not the rejects. We
No,
reject.
we chose to quit. And there's some haters on social media that are insisting that I was fired. And I'm like, I actually wish I was fired back in the day. So I could get out of my contract, and that would have been a good thing at the time. But no. No,
You
we
do
are
have some haters on social media. What's up with that?
not.
I think it's because number one, this is my take on it. Number one, you're definitely willing to talk about stuff on Twitter that I tend to avoid, mostly because I hate Twitter. It's not that I hate it as like a platform per se. I just hate how people talk to each other on Twitter, so I tend to avoid it. Number two, I think you were probably more active on it in journalism, like in TV news. You have this following that followed you in TV news, and then you make the switch, and I think it caught some people off guard.
It did. It caught people off guard. And when I was on television, I was criticized for being, a Democrat, a Republican, and everyone was criticizing me on every side, which was great because I just gave the information. I tried not to show any bias whatsoever. Now that I'm out on my own, I'm doing a lot of different things, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but I am more of a more independent, but more of a conservative base. If I talk about on Twitter something about I went to church today, or I believe in God, or family values, that I really didn't talk about much when I was on the air because the news directors they wanted me to shy away, but that'll bring out the haters even now. If I say something like, we need more family values in our country, that'll bring out the haters. But yeah, I'm still, when it comes to politics and candidates, I'm not backing anybody. I'm not really supporting anybody because, as we know, they can all be corrupt.
One of the things I noticed when I left TV news, it was more apparent to me who followed me from a particular political viewpoint, because I guess because I was an environmental reporter, I didn't really, I don't know, I wasn't in sort of the political world, though environmental journalism is very political. I didn't know that when I got into it. I didn't realize how political the environment is. Obviously now I'm deep down that rabbit hole. But I had a lot of, I think, just your mainline Hillary Clinton type Democrats following me. And so then when I started doing the independent stuff and I was questioning some of the stuff that political venue espoused, like for instance, all about Bill Gates, and putting him on CNN telling you to go get vaccinated for COVID-19, and like, why would we give Bill Gates the option to talk about this without any criticism? He's just like the god of all things medical and science. Like there was all this celebratory handling of him, not like he is controversial whatsoever. And so I would ask questions about that, and people were like, "What's wrong with you?" Like, and you're a Seattle local. How could you question Santa Claus? I mean, he's like the local guy who gives us all the gifts and everything. So it just came to be obvious that, like, over time, I think I had accumulated a particular, I don't want to say all the people were this way, but a lot of people who cared about this issue thought a certain way. And that made me realize that I was probably reporting in a way that attracted that particular type of viewer, which does jive with the fact that I think for a long time I wasn't aware of the political games that I was being used to play. And I say that because I really didn't know. And I'm so much more aware of that now, which is why I don't talk about our industry as if like I was so much better than everybody else. I was totally part of the game for so
Yeah.
long.
Absolutely. And, and working in, as you know, in a newsroom, and I was a main anchor in Flint, Michigan. We're market 65, and your viewers might know New York's number 1, and what's number 212, somewhere in Montana, I think, Glendive, Montana. But I was in the middle of the pack and main anchor. I didn't go out and report much, but I did do investigations. And when I did report in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a much bigger market, in the NBC station, and it comes from, the top down. And the last 5 years during COVID, I did start to question things more. And, even back in the day, I didn't really, as you said, I was kind of part of the machine, and I just went along with, things. I always had an inquisitive mind, but it was kind of set by a narrative. I did have great managers and great people, but being independent now, I'm able to broach subjects that I couldn't have before. And I'm worried, at least in the mid markets, the smaller markets. I don't know about Seattle or Miami or Tampa, but the middle markets, small markets are decimated. There is no such thing as investigative journalism. It does not exist. My old station that I worked for, it was a Sinclair broadcasting station. I know they had one in Seattle. They have one reporter left, and that's it. So they're doing a disservice to
one investigative reporter,
one reporter completely on staff, the whole staff.
Wait, your station?
My former station, and yeah, they eliminated their weekends, they eliminated their mornings,
No.
they eliminated their 5 p.m. So they have a 6, 10, and 11, and no weekends. Now they have one reporter for all of it, for the whole shebang.
Wow.
And that's the way in many mid-markets, smaller markets are doing it. And you can't hold people accountable. You're basically lucky to get on the basic news of the day. And then they're relying more on CNN news source, as you probably know, and they're relying on, being funneled from the AP or whatever. So the bigger markets, at least Seattle, I know Sinclair Como in Seattle. So they do have investigative reporters, but even at this level, like in Flint, this market has about 600,000 people. They are not being served there's no accountability.
Wow, one reporter. And does that person shoot and edit their own video?
They do have 2 photographers at the station, so they usually go out and shoot their own stuff. And yeah, when I was at the station, we had, in the heyday, like 3 years ago, they had about 12 or 13 reporters, and the ratings dropping, and the revenue's not coming in. And Sinclair, other thoughts about them, but they're not doing it properly. They bought a sports network. They're probably going bankrupt. So it's just not, it's sad. It's sad because the public's not getting what they should be getting.
Mm-hmm. I always say that if they were just more honest about that structure that you just discussed, I would be a lot more comfortable with the product. Like if they came on the 5 o'clock news and said, "Thanks for watching the 5 o'clock news. We have one reporter working for us." I get is not the. Did you take over my show?
Oh, I think you broke up a little bit.
You take over?
I was about to take over
I know.
for your show, but now you're back. You're good.
It froze. I may have to open the door. So I have to do this. I still don't have my studio set up, and I'm in the bedroom.
Okay.
And I have the door closed, but I think that may affect the Wi-Fi, but I'm doing it to keep the kids asleep. See, these are the things I have to balance in my own newsroom. Anyway, like I told Dave, he could take over the show anytime if I freeze. But what I was saying was if your station said, "Hey, we only have one reporter doing all the work," so like this is a very non-comprehensive look at the news of the day, and you knew what you're getting. But the problem is they come on and say like, "This is the most accurate name in news," or "We're digging for you, we're doing your work." And they make you think like they have all these resources going towards journalism when they really don't. You should just know, like, it's like going to what you think is a 5-star restaurant with locally grown food, but you're at McDonald's. You're really at McDonald's. It's false advertising. They should just tell you you're at McDonald's. That way you know how to order appropriately on the menu. And if you get heart disease later, you know why.
Yeah, in Sinclair, I don't know if other companies are doing this. They have a team in DC. They have maybe 6 or 7 reporters. They do a lot of stuff nationally and feed it down to their 80 stations. But what's the purpose of local news? Because they're producing a lot of stuff national at the corporate level, feeding it down to us, but it's not local news. So you're right, if they were just honest about that. But it's also a disservice, and politicians take advantage of it. In Michigan, we have Governor Gretchen Whitmer. I give her credit. Her PR people are amazing, and they know how to write news releases. And I've seen, because of the lack of staff, younger or producers just copy and paste onto a web story, and I would lose it, because I was also our digital content manager, And I would say, no, you can't just copy and paste news releases. But when you have almost no staff, you're running your head against the wall. So it's a lose-lose.
I was shooting and editing all of my own video too on top of it. And this isn't a major market. Seattle's right before you go network, you know? So yeah, I
Wow.
did a lot of that on my own, which on one hand gave me the ability to go out to do the environmental stories that I probably would not have otherwise been allowed to do if I had taken a photographer from the staff. They probably wouldn't have let me go do what I did. Casey Jones says, that's because local news sucks. And
Right.
then local news stations have like 40 subscribers on their YouTube channels. That's not true. My station, I'm going to show you right now, King 5 Seattle, has 278,000 subscribers. They've got more than twice what I do. And local news is your last hope. This is just the way I look at it. It's your last hope for like mainstream news to ever correct itself. They're closer to the subject matter. They have people who have to live in the communities and suffer the consequences that are reporting. They can actually do good journalism if they put the resources in place. It's unlikely there's going to be much change at the national level. They're basically just cherry picking based on politics and ratings and stuff like that. But local news, because they're on the ground in their communities, if they stuck to community reporting and they didn't just go stand outside Walmart and ask people what they think about Trump, they would do a lot better. But unfortunately, when you don't have staff, like Dave was just describing, you do a lot more of the Walmart, what do you think about Trump reporting, and less of the let's go down to city council and sit there for 4 hours and figure out what's going on that's going to actually affect our communities, because you don't have the manpower to do that.
And I worked with amazing journalists. And over the past 3 years, there have been so many people, so many quality people that have left television. Detroit had an investigative reporter, it was just amazing. He left. So many people have left the business, and it's now tough to even get people to apply for jobs. We had a weekend anchor position open that paid decently. It took a year to fill it. Because out of college, there's so many different choices now. I remember we interviewed a candidate for a digital job, and she turned it down because she was hired at the Washington Post to be a TikTok, not just a TikTok editor. Her only job at the Washington Post was designed the thumbnails on their TikTok accounts, and that was it. And she was making good money, and she turned down our job. So it's even hard to fill the positions. Bigger markets, it's probably easier. But when you're talking, you know, our size market, 60, 70, 50, it's just not easy. And some of I wonder at times, I like to talk to college professors, what are they teaching? What are they going on? What's going on? Because it's disturbing. And what I was seeing when we were interviewing people, it's not like myself or you or others. I tell everyone, you have to have it in your heart to be a journalist. You have to have that drive, that motivation. And I'm not seeing that a lot with younger people. It exists, but not like when and I'm 48 now.
I don't know what you think though about that drive and how it can turn for the worse, because I do have friends still in the business who very much agree with what you just said. Like, you have to have it in your heart and you need to, really that it have this sort of purpose about you. But that, I think, has been one of the most damning personality traits for journalists over the last few years, because when they're full of this public service mentality, like they're here to stand between the viewer and destruction, physical, moral, and whatnot, and they know everything, which they don't. I think this is a dangerous combination.
It is. And I get, with me, it was more of a passion in my heart I was always wanting to break stories, to uncover, to hold people accountable, to break what story it was. That was the passion for the job, even now, to not necessarily putting myself up there or I found it really cool. When I was working in Pittsburgh and I had 4 counties that I covered, and it was a passion to uncover whatever it may be with me. But I know others, it's a different scenario and what they're talking about. For me, it was just a passion of working for the viewer. That's what it was, trying to uncover things.
A few comments here on the locals live chat. Spoon-fed readers equal reporter. Local news will be controlled by biased bosses anyways. If local news is our last hope, we're all screwed because they are just brainwashed. It would be interesting to see Bill with you. That's my co-host for media show that we do every
Oh, I've
week
seen
called
him.
Tittle
I've
Tattle.
seen
We
him.
need to get,
Yeah.
we'll get Bill on sometime with you.
Yeah.
When you are only allowed to present one side one way, many are not okay with dishonesty. Honesty. Okay, I want to ask you to follow up on that for a second, but I want to tell people how they can follow you if you're interested in what Dave's got to
Oh,
say. You can go
thank
to
you.
davebondy.locals.com. So he's also on Locals, DAVEBONDY.locals.com, and he's on Twitter at Dave Bondy TV. And you have they're keeping it real with Dave Bondy. He's got lots of content there too, and that's where you can see all his haters in the comments on his tweets. That's always the fun part. Dave, if you don't mind, sit back for a second and grab yourself a glass of wine if you don't already have one. I mean, it might be a little bit early, I guess, where we are, but whatever. Drink whatever you want. I feel like I'm dehydrated these days, so I've been trying to drink. Are you familiar with Soleil water? Have you heard of this? It's basically
No.
putting Himalayan pink salt in your water. I've been trying to do that. In fact, I have some right here. See? Anyway, yeah, trying to refuel the electrolytes. Okay, but if you are trying to drain yourself of electrolytes and get hungover, this is a great way to do it. AllisonWinePromo.com, 50% off my favorite wines and 50% off shipping. These are the best wines that you could get if you're a Malbec drinker. They're high altitude, remote regions of Argentina. One from the oldest vineyard in Argentina, over 200 years old. One from the third highest vineyard in the world at almost 9,000 feet. These are no joke. My favorite wines. They asked if I wanted to read ads for them because I already was drinking extreme altitude wines from Argentina, and they were like, "That's what we do." So it was a match made in heaven. So if you're a wine drinker, this is a great way to support my work. I really appreciate everybody who has over the last couple of years. Bonner Wine has stuck with me through some crazy interviews and some crazy times. So go show them some love if you drink wine. It's a great gift if you've got a birthday coming up or any number of holidays coming up. Go get some AllisonWinePromo.com. It's a great way to support my work and also have a great glass of wine. We also have twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. If you like coffee or maybe you have a hangover from drinking too much Allison Wine Promo, twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. We've got light roast, dark roast, and espresso and tea. I typically drink the espresso in the morning with my raw milk latte. It's very good. I also drink the Katura tea. It's a great cold brew option for summer and also one of my favorite products as well. So you can, tea drinker, not really big into caffeine, we've got something for you. You love caffeine, we got something for you. twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. So thanks to my sponsors for that. Okay, so let's go back to that comment on locals. And again, AllisonMorrow.locals.com too, if you want to support my work and be on the editorial board, because there are questions that people put in ahead of time for Dave. Do you think that overt pressure or censorship, some might call it, from managers is the biggest problem, or is it what I typically call stormtrooper reporters who are already of the ilk to push the propaganda? You don't need to whip them in line. Like by the time you're at the cognitive level of being needed to be whipped back into place, you're probably on your way out. That's the way I see it. And you're likely your issue with like biased reporting, to me, the number one issue is the biased reporter who's just not a critical thinker and is going through their day thinking this is all there is.
Critical thinking is absolute must. And it seemed like, well, at least with me, I would always I challenged, we had the Flint water crisis, and I would openly challenge the governor and so forth. And he was a Republican, and I went after Democrats as well. But the critical thinking, I don't see that as much anymore, or taking the news release. And, I'm not trusting of many people, as many journalists aren't, but you don't see that. But also it was kind of self-censorship in a way, especially during COVID. My company did give me a little more leeway on things, but you kind of knew in an editorial meeting, if you would pitch an idea, that it would not be allowed, and you would just think, you kind of knew the boundaries, really. They allowed me to do a story in Michigan, how during COVID, Michigan still doesn't release the comorbidities with COVID. They don't say if someone died, did they die from, with COVID or from COVID? Did they have leukemia? Were they obese? I did a story on it. My company, actually, they let me, and they were beaten down. We were accused of killing people and so forth. But you're right. The critical thinking, it's just kind of on cruise control with, in the editorial meeting. There's not a lot of questioning, and a lot of it's just built in by management and by, for example, my company. They were so scared of being sued, and I understand being sued, but at at least maybe it was a Sinclair thing, but if you challenge something, there were many stories that should have been done that weren't done, but because they were scared of the possibility of a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. Well, what you brought up too about just public backlash. Look, stations are businesses, right? So these TV stations want to make money. And if they're like, this isn't going to be popular, or even worse, I think what I've seen over the last couple of years is even more than ratings and money is being on the wrong side of the powerful, and it's not even just like, oh, we want to keep our cozy relationship with this or that or particular special interest or person who's in power, but also I think birds of a feather flock together, and there just tends to be a lot of groupthink. This kind of, I guess, I don't know what kind of caste system it is exactly. Is it a academic or intellectual or corporate caste system that they all just like, they just kind of have similar mentalities? They're just, I don't know. It's just weird that they all kind of think the same. So it's like, well, I trust so and so at the CDC, or I trust this person. Like, I remember when we got this press release, this is something I totally regurgitated as propaganda completely, and like a couple days later realized how I had been, I'd been taken by the Department of Health in Washington, and that changed things a lot for me. I mean, that was probably one of the major turning points for me in my career, because I just trusted that when they told us something, it was real. And they had told us that they were suspending this doctor's license because he was experimenting on his patients. And we just like went outside his office at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. I'm the lead story. This guy's experimenting on his patients, no comment from him. Of course not, because it's 10 o'clock at night. He's not in the office. We didn't wait to do the story until the next day or the day after, when we really could understand what we were talking about. And why did I assume the Department of Health was telling the truth? Like, why? I mean, I was just one of those people that just like, we would get the press releases from the Department of Health or whatever other government agency, and I guess we just assumed, or I assumed, I wouldn't say we, but I assumed that like they were held to an ethical standard to tell us the truth. Like, for some reason, that a corporate interest was a biased interest, but the government interest was an objective one. But that's BS. That's totally BS. I just somehow I bought into all of that, and so I don't know where that comes from, but I just wish I had more managers tell us every day, like, corporate, government, otherwise, hey, listen, there's sharks waiting in the water around us right now constantly, and we should be aware of that. And just because the government tells us one thing, like, it was like, if we got a press release from the government, we had no problem copying and pasting and putting in the prompter. If you called me though and told me some scoop, or you challenged the government, whatever, I'd be like, well, wait a second, we need some time to investigate this. We need to get like 3 other sources confirming this or whatever. Like, why did we hold you, the citizen, to a higher standard than the government? I mean, all these things are just weird. Dave, I'm going to throw that at you with one other question from alisonmar.locals.com, because my son just woke up. I'm going to grab him.
Oh,
So
okay.
you're going to take over the show for a second. So tell people what you think about what I just said, but
I'll keep that.
also, and I'll bring him down, but also I'll just leave this up on the screen. I'm going to go down to one of the questions too, so you have something to talk about.
Okay, I'll keep you going.
I know you want to think you're unbiased, but all of us have our biases. Better to spell them out, don't you think? So that's a question too. All right, I'll be right back, I promise.
Okay, take your time. Yeah. I have a 6-year-old who I just heard upstairs as well. So yeah, no, the question right there about the bias. We all have biases. And myself, I lean more conservative. I do. But I'm not putting myself in that box, because, as I was saying, there are Republicans, there are Democrats, they're all corrupt at times. And I will never support publicly a candidate or a political party, but I will say that there is a bias. I do lean, to the conservative side, and people do know that. But it's important as a journalist that if Trump does something bad, if he's arrested, I'm going to report it. I'm going to put it out there. I'm not going to shy away from something just because I may not believe in that. But I will tell you that I believe, and if something is wrong, I believe that if I personally, pornography and books with school children is wrong. So yeah, I think people know how I feel, and I'm able to tell people that. But that's why I think I get criticized from both sides at times, because I will go after both sides. I don't think any politician is a god or something like that. So, that's a good point. That's a good question. And let me see. We had another question on here. When is he making his big announcement? No, I'm not sure if that was me, but Allison is going to check on one of her staff members right now, her little one. So I am taking over for the show. So let me know what comments you would like to ask myself or Allison when she gets back, everyone. I'm co-hosting the show right now. That's really cool. But I do want to talk about something that Allison just mentioned, the moment that she had in TV news, the aha moment with her when she was regurgitating a news release. There was an incident in Michigan where a baby, I think the child was maybe 8 months old, 9 months old, died in the state of Michigan, came out and said the baby died from COVID. The baby died from COVID. All of your children need to be vaccinated. The baby died from COVID. And they didn't give us any more information. Welcome.
Okay, I'm back. What'd I miss?
We were just talking and explaining, and I was getting to the aha moment. You had one, and if you need to go, let me know.
No, go. Well, I have the kids right next to me, so we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
But I didn't. Did I cut you off? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not really. How much do you make a year? We'll get to that.
Depends on where you are. I made $18,500 my first job. That was pre-tax.
18,500 for me in Evansville, Indiana.
Nice.
And I made my way to keep going up. But in this market, close to 6 digits, but I'm in market 75. Getting back to the aha moment really quick, it's similar to what you had said. Governor Whitmer in Michigan, the MDHHS, the health department, had a news release. An 8-month-old child died from COVID. All of your children need to be vaccinated. This is horrible. This is bad. And I went on the air, and that was a soundbite at the top of the show, and it was team coverage. And a couple days later, I actually thought, okay, who is this child? What do we know? And we started digging into it, and we found that it was an 8-month-old child in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. And Michigan and Wisconsin are right next to each other in the UP. So the child actually died at a hospital in Wisconsin, and we were able to find out that the child was about to pass away anyway. It's sad as it is. They had their organs outside of their body, whatever it is. But it turned out the Wisconsin cause of death was not COVID. The child got COVID while the child was in the process of dying. So basically, the Whitmer administration, they hyped the child up, and they didn't give us all the details. And I did an interview with the Wisconsin coroner in whatever the county, Milwaukee County, whatever county that's in, and then brought it to light. But I felt bad that we just played it up like, a child has died, you need to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
And we didn't give into. Those are the things that my boss, I give her credit, she let me question. She let me dig into it. And I think she took a little heat from corporate because we were coming in, you're baby killers. You want to,
Yeah.
But that was my aha moment right there, that, well, what's the details? And the state just said, due to privacy, we don't know. And there was a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm. I meant to ask you this a lot earlier, grumpy old man. What put him over the line? Was it one thing or an accumulation of events? So yeah, why did you quit?
Oh yeah, I think it was over 3-4 years in the making. The company I worked for, at one point, we were really going solid, and then they just kept losing staff. It was also family for me. I'm 48 years old. I have a wife, 2 children. I wasn't, as most of us in this business, especially I was night side. I worked 2:45 to midnight. I hardly saw family. And then as the staff was being cut more and more, I was working 16 hours a day, 17, because I was doing digital content manager and main anchor and reporting at times. And I didn't want to move. I had chances to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, Mobile, other cities, but my kids were rooted in the community. My wife's from here. I'm from here. So it was a combination of things. And then when it got to be, the narratives and not being really comfortable questioning authority and not being able to do certain stories, it was a perfect storm, I would say.
Okay, let's Let's move up one more to Gregory here. General question. What does he think that TV news gets right? And what is wrong with TV news?
What does TV news get right?
Yeah, and what does it get wrong? What's wrong with
Yeah,
it and what is
what
it
does it get
right?
wrong? I mean,
I
during
mean,
the
this could
Flint
be like
water,
a whole class, you could teach in college. So I know you probably have to pick or choose. I wish, I don't know if Dave and I will ever get invited to be adjunct professors or to go in and do any training. Probably not. Do you think your coworkers know what you do now? Are they following you?
they are, and I think some of them probably aren't. I don't know if they're not happy, but a lot of them feel the same way. But they're also very disappointed in, at least where I worked, in my last employer, with the way the company, the direction is, and they don't seem to give the resources. So, but I think when it comes to some of my questioning things, there may be employees I worked with in the past who aren't too happy that I'm
Mhm.
questioning certain things. That may be because of their political beliefs. Because I have worked with other employees, they have strong political beliefs, and they would voice them in the
Mhm.
newsroom. And
Yeah.
that's something I never did. I would never say, "Hey, go Trump" or "Go Biden." I would
Right.
never, or "F Trump," and I heard that from journalists in the
Oh, yeah.
newsroom
Yeah.
loudly, and I'm like,
Yeah.
to me, that was a no-no.
Right. Yeah, I remember, like, for the first time ever hearing what sounded like reaction to a sports match in the newsroom during the Trump administration, um, and not like your team was winning, I'll just put it that way. They hated that guy. And, yeah, I always thought that was crazy too. And just what people felt comfortable putting on their public, even, well, definitely private, because I could see their private social media accounts, but public social media accounts, what people were getting away with, I was shocked that the corporation was allowing that. Sometimes our general manager would peep in every once in a while an email and be like, "Hey, remember this is a place where we don't share our biases," But for the most part, it was just, yeah, it was accepted to act like a total, like you were at a bar or something, a sports match where you're talking politics during the Trump administration, and I guess that just never changed. And you just knew. I can't remember who it was. Oh, that guy who played Charles in Charge, whatever his name, Scott Ritter, is that his name? What's his name?
Got Bayo?
Scott Baio, yeah, Scott
You,
Ritter. Scott
okay.
Baio. He said once, I thought this was so accurate. I'm pretty sure it was him. He said that if there's somebody in Hollywood whose political viewpoint you don't know, they're a conservative. Because anybody whose viewpoint you do know is probably a liberal of some kind, kind of neoliberal.
Yeah,
Um,
it was
but if
okay for
yeah,
them.
yeah, but you'll be quiet if you're a conservative. You're just not going to say anything. So if you're like, I don't know what that person thinks, they're probably a conservative because they don't want to tell you what they think. And I found that to be very true in our newsroom. That, like, the people who just they didn't get into it, they didn't talk about it, they didn't voice their opinion on politics or whatever. If you did eventually get into a conversation with them about it and you started to learn more about their perspective, you would find that they were probably conservative leaning, or at least they were like what I would call the, like, old school liberal, the hippies of the 70s. They were really, like, questioning big pharma and the political infrastructure of the United States and elections and all that stuff. Like, just, they were skeptical of the man, I guess. But at the time, for the most part, anybody who was even remotely, because we were sold this existential threat of the Trump administration, and anybody who didn't see it as an existential threat was seen as a pro-Trumper, and so people just didn't speak up. So that's what I found to be the case in our newsroom.
That sounds exactly the newsroom that I was in, and other newsrooms that I've heard from friends as well throughout the country. And myself, I would not get political. I would have viewers on both sides going after me. I even had a diehard Trump supporter. He was arrested by U.S. Marshals because he threatened to kill me and my family. And it's only because I did it. I was reading in the news a story about DeSantis that he was surging in the polls a while ago. But he got mad. He called the station, messaged me, threatened to kill me. But no, it's funny because I'm not. People didn't know where I leaned, but yeah, you're right though. In the newsroom, I didn't speak up, and I do lean that way. But I do know that Trump is not a god and Biden isn't a god. But it's it's just gotten out of control. Uh-oh.
I didn't freeze.
Oh,
I couldn't find the tab. I was trying to pull this up. I know. I'm on a laptop, so I usually use 2 screens, and it's so much easier. I don't know if you have a 2-screen setup, but
I do have a
oh,
setup now of 2 screen. Yeah.
yeah, it makes so much
Oh, a
easier.
lot
So,
easier. A lot easier. Yeah.
okay, there were actually some good comments here. This is what I was trying to pull up from the live chat,
You know,
and
it's not a vegan.
yeah, not a vegan, right? I'm so thankful there are young people like you two who are broadcasting the truth about MSM propaganda that gives me hope for my grandchildren's future. I love that Dawn's wife is calling us young people. That's my favorite part of the whole that I'm young.
Wow.
I
Yeah,
know.
that's nice.
My wife, who Zed says, has been following Dave Bondy in local news. I have been following Dave's locals channel since he started. I have appreciated his discourse in the intervening time. The Allison question bazooka has been fired when you need to distract for 5 minutes to deal with the kids. Oh yeah, Allison question bazooka, yeah, has been fired. Yeah, here's the question. I gotta go. My audience is very used to that. I feel partyless now too after being a huge Democrat my entire life. Since I was a Democrat, I held them to a higher standard and they failed me. I do have a lot of people, like I said, who are not necessarily traditional conservatives who are sick and tired of what's going on. And I find that when we divide it just by the conservative versus liberal, we don't do justice to the issue. And I do think that the media loves to play that card. They love to say right winger or right wing extremist, when a lot of the people who follow me, I would never consider themselves a right wing person at all, but they still don't like what's going on. But if you can get people to think it's just like right wingers, I guess, that this is like the new dirty term, then they can feel safer, I guess, going to sleep at night. I'm not quite sure. Okay, Lily, can you give him back his marker? Do you hear what's going on under my desk right now?
There. I remember those days. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's got to have everything he has. Okay. Here's a good one for you to chew on from Wells Mortensen. Do you like dwarf goats? Orcas? When can we expect you to move to Florida? Extra bonus if he eats carrots broken in half. Just kidding. I have no questions. I already know. All right, Jack. It's okay, dude. Come here. All right, come here. Yeah. I already know. It's like this.
Hello.
This condition is untreatable and merely requires understanding, not medicine. Sunlight, organic zinc, occasional animal to pet, microphone, First Amendment. Come to think of it.
I do that to a lot of people.
I know, right? This condition is quite debilitating. Care to rethink? I think the question here is, well, it's kind of funny the way it was laid out, but talking about your condition of like questioning the news and leaving and everything, and then at the end is, the condition is quite debilitating. Here to rethink, because you do get to, Dave, I'll just warn you. I mean, it depends on what you cover, but I started out like in a YouTube world. Okay, go ahead, get some paper. Don't color on the floor though. Hang on, I'll get you. Dave's gonna answer a question for everybody, and then I will get you some paper to color. So in 1 second. Because she colored the floor the other day. We just bought
that too. Yeah.
Bought this house, so we're just trying to at least like make it look like we care for it for like at least 5 months.
My wife's in the background shaking her head. We all know. She
knows. Yeah. Hang on 1 second. I'll get you paper. I started out, on YouTube, and I was like killing it, and then I just had to, open my big fat mouth and cover these controversial topics, including COVID. Right? I was doing censorship and covering doctors and scientists. And, eventually, like now my channel is really throttled, and I don't know how, there's similar issues in alternative news as there are in mainstream news. And yeah, I mean, it's like, if you keep going down the path, I mean, I don't know where it leads, but I think that was kind of the question. Do you have any concerns about that? I'll go get the paper for Lily. You can respond to that. Where do you see your place in alternative media? Can you do the journalism you feel like you couldn't do in corporate news? Because there are similar, maybe not the exact same, but there are limitations, to being able to make it in this world. You have to be very savvy about how you run your business. Because like I said, like the YouTube world, which is where we used to all make money, you can't really make money. Hey, do not hurt. Did your kids want to kill each other at 3 and 11 months old? I mean, honestly.
3 and 11 months. Maybe that. No, not at that point. But now that
look,
yeah.
Look at his face.
Yeah.
She knows. She took his marker. She took his marker. All right, take it away, Dave. I'll be right back.
Yeah. No, I'm very happy with what I do, and I do have to be extremely careful on certain platforms. I have a big following on TikTok, but I know if I post the wrong thing, I will be taken down. And that's why I decided to do locals, as did Allison. So I urge all of you, if you are not a paid supporter, to sign up for Allison's page, because that is helping independent journalists. And all of you probably know this, but locals, there's no algorithm, there's no censorship. And that's why locals is amazing. And I think this is why people like, I know some don't like him, but Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, people like that are continuing to grow big time. And I think I can still do what I do. I did quit my full-time job, and I didn't talk about this. When Allison gets back, I can talk about it, but I do have a side gig, kind of. I do social media for several companies on the side, and I do work for a nonprofit doing social media. So this is not my only thing. I would love it to be my only thing, but I'm still working on that. But I do realize in the blink of an eye, I know Brandy Cruz, I've talked to her several times. She was dinged on Facebook one day for no reason. And it's very tough. And that's why I want to build like a locals or a Substack. But the powers that be, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. I'm on TikTok and I have a big following, but you say one wrong word and boom, you're done. But I think the big companies, they're realizing that, at least my old company, they didn't think people were attracted to people. They thought people were attracted to a brand. But I think they always said to me, why would people listen to 3 hours to Joe Rogan? Why would they do that? They never could grasp the concept of people. They never promoted us as people. They promoted the brand. And I think people like people. So it's a tough way to maneuver around. I don't know if you were listening or not, but this isn't my full-time thing now. I do social media for a nonprofit, and I also do managing social media for business on the side. I would love to do this full-time, but I'm the main breadwinner in the family. My wife is a cosmetologist on the side. So it's not easy.
Well, as you know, okay, we're on locals, and thank God for locals. I mean, I'll tell you what, when I got fired from the Department of Natural Resources, which was the job that I had in between TV and what I do now, which is full-time independent, which they chose for me because I had a day job too until they fired me. But I love it. But thank God for locals, because actually at the time it was rather new, and I think it was my buddy Jeff Filday, who we met through Lynn. My husband and I met because he's a veteran, and we met him through my podcast because he had started following me. He's in the Seattle area. And he was like, you should start a locals because these other big YouTubers are there, and it's a pro free speech platform. And thank God I did, because I had no idea that like a year later I was going to get fired, and locals is like half the paycheck. I mean, it is a considerable amount of what keeps me going. So yeah, I mean, thank you to everybody who's over on locals right now, who's still a supporter of the Alice Morrow Show and everything, because I mean, it's a fine line. Like my husband also has a business, but he's a small business owner too, and my gosh, he trains law enforcement in human behavior. So that's a sink or swim industry right now, I mean, so it depends on him if there's any, funding to do that. So it's one of those things where on one hand you have a lot of freedom, which is awesome. I love it. I love being home with the kids. I wouldn't give that up for $1 million paycheck a year.
Yeah.
But, you just have to be real about the fact that like with the freedom comes the risk, with the reward, I guess. And but I am so grateful for locals. Rumble, I hope Rumble eventually gets to the point where you can be sustainable without like having to get a deal with them or something, because right now the ad revenue is like, there's nothing. You can't, It's not, because I get a lot of views on Rumble now, but it doesn't translate into a paycheck. So I hope that, but neither does YouTube anymore either. So for me, not for some people are still doing really well on YouTube, but not my channel. My channel is dead on YouTube for the most part. It's on its last leg. Kenny Eagle. So I have to be honest, since I can only afford to support a few independent creators on locals, I'm sticking with Allison since she almost always reads my questions.
Right.
LOL. But on a more serious note, it's almost certain that internet news will soon bury cable and air networks. How do you see yourself, Allison, and other smaller creators holding up in the market against the new media giants like The Blaze, Daily Wire, and Mug Club? You want to answer that one, Dave?
Yeah, and I don't know if on-air networks will be newspapers still around. I think local news will be around. I think in the market I'm in, there may only be one local station eventually. I think my old station will fold up shop and not do local news. I think there will still be local news. There will still be CNN and so forth. But the Daily Wire and this so forth. I mean, people, they're popular as well. I think myself, Allison, it doesn't take and we don't need a million people watching for us to have a nice make a nice living. And I think that's the connection that we're making with people. And that's why a lot of people, I was surprised at the number of people that did, pay to sign up, because they're also believing in the mission, and that's why they signed up as well. So I know there's a lot of people trying to get in this space. It did help, though, as with you, with my following. I was a main anchor and I had a big following on social, but I don't know where it's going to go. I don't like Tucker Carlson right now. He doesn't have to worry about money. He's no problem about money.
Right.
But yeah, I think local news will still be around, but in this market, there'll probably only be one station doing it.
Somebody on Rumble was asking about is it true that only 6 people own like all the media. I don't know what the exact number is, but more and more, yeah, big conglomerates are buying up the smaller news ownership companies. So the companies that Dave and I used to work for, Tegna, Sinclair, Gray, what is it? Nexstar, I think, whatever. Like there's just a few companies that own, like, as far as local is concerned, and then the national stuff is.
Yeah, and in this market, Sinclair owned. We were NBC and Fox. We were combined. They owned both. So even in that market, market, yeah, we did both, and they're probably both going to be shut out. So there'll just be an ABC and a CBS doing news. I can see a lot of consolidation with that, and more. I know streaming. CBS Detroit just started basically trying to stream like almost every hour of the day. I think there's a lot of experimentation going on.
Okay, let's go to one other question. Here we go. What do you do for health insurance?
And I was talking about this a little while ago. I do have a full-time job at a nonprofit doing social media for them. So they do provide insurance. Like I said, myself, I'm pretty much the main breadwinner. So I have that full-time job. They do allow me to work from home a couple days a week. So that does help as well. My locals, my independent journalism, I do 2 shows on locals on Thursdays and Sundays. And social media management, my wife now, I'm training her and she's getting really good at it. She's helping out. But the insurance is through a company, the nonprofit. It's not as good I had with the television station, but that's what I do. And it's a lot of moving parts.
So your wife does social media. My husband does my technical directing. So
Nice.
It's a family. Nice. Even though he like has his own business that he's running, I also force him to do my technical work, because otherwise it's like, Lynn, I can't figure this out. So he just comes in. He's made himself his own position
Nice.
on the management board. Okay, local reporters in my region can't write without mistakes and typically get the facts wrong. I tend to read comments in my local area's Facebook and forum group if I'm curious about anything local. No one was allowed to cover adverse reactions from the shots. Very few did. The government controls of narratives have been eye-opening, skeptical about everything. So this will go down a little bit to the newer ones. I think, where was this one? Did I get them all? Great interview. Who's Ed? Okay, just making sure I got. And I never liked the news telling me who was the best candidate, even if it was the candidate I supported. I do think that's an interesting phenomenon, and journalists are, I think, just as susceptible to believing this too. Not seeing how censorship, for instance, if it's somebody that you think is nuts and they're wiped off the internet, they don't seem to understand how that pendulum swings back in their direction and how we all lose in that case. And I do think journalists can be a part of that, even though I feel like the job should require that you step back and not celebrate or mourn necessarily a particular issue is, one side or the other. I do think that for some reason over the last few years, and I do date it back in large part to the Trump administration, because I remember that's when the New York Times became very vocal about how they're just going to start doing journalism differently because of this existential threat. But yeah, they don't seem to really care. Like, at least when censorship is concerned, they seem to be cheering on when people are wiped off the internet. And they not just that, they're like baiting these platforms to continue doing it. Like, every time somebody isn't wiped off the platform, then they run an article that's like, can you believe this is still on there? I mean, what is Elon Musk doing allowing this on Twitter? And it's like that's what they want to happen. It's not even just they cheer it on when it does. It's like they're part of the machine that's trying to get people wiped. And they don't see how ironic it is that they benefit from the First Amendment, and yet they're trying to remove it for the average American citizen.
It's disturbing. It is. And the other day, and I've been calling out, what I see, and there was something, it was in headlines. I try to inform people about misleading headlines. I think NBC News, their website, there was in Nebraska, the governor signed legislation, something towards gender pronouns, something like this. But the headline was, and it was a news story, not an editorial, the tyrannical action of the governor or something. And I just did a whole video on the fact that that's editorial. Who says it's tyrannical? NBC News did in their news story. They didn't cite anybody. So it's those little things that I'm trying to do now to call out more for people, that people are taking that as just fact. Oh, the tyrannical governor. No, that's what NBC News said. It seems to me at the national level, the networks, it's just getting worse. And Fox and MSNBC and CNN, they're all, they can all be accused of that. But it's interesting. I watch all of the networks, and some people think I'm crazy for watching MSNBC at times. I watch them all, and it's just interesting night and day how the coverage is on certain things, or the coverage doesn't exist at all on certain things.
I'm here, but I was like, oh, don't stop talking, because you can hear what's going on in the background. Yeah, we're slowly devolving here. That's okay. I think we're going to wrap it, Dave, but just throwing over one last comment from Chris Whalen, CPA. He was actually just on yesterday. Hang on, Lily, 1 second. He said, where is it? Oh, gosh, I just saw it. Basically saying that, like, his clients, I have many clients who portray the outside world. They are incredibly liberal and on board with all the woke stuff, but they're truly conservative financially and politically behind closed doors. And I think a lot of people do that. It's just I don't want the mob coming after me. As Dave's realized, Bernie Cruz, you brought her up, same thing. I mean, you take a lot of heat when you're willing to not even like come out there against the narrative, just even like show the other side. I mean, all of a sudden, like how the news typically will go. I showed this article from NPR the other day with Bill on our Tittle Tattle show that I was telling people, that's the supporter-only show we do. Yeah. NPR's like how right-wing media is covering the Trump indictment. But how many times have you ever seen a mainstream outlet say how left-wing media is covering Joe Biden? They never say that.
Never.
So
never.
Anyway.
And yeah, and Brandy's in Seattle, so she's got a lot of battles to deal with.
For sure. All right, everybody, go support Dave Bondy, DAVEBONDY.locals.com. Oh my, Dave, I think you're around for probably one of the more extremist child live streams. So I appreciate you.
I'm used to that. It's good time.
Yeah, it makes you grateful you have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old who are not necessarily erupting like this all the time. Okay, DaveBondy.locals.com. Dave, thanks again for taking the time. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you so much. I got to have you on as well.
Oh, that'd be great. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a great weekend.